Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC London, and in the co-main event, we have a featherweight fight between Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this featherweight fight. I've already done some UFC London prediction videos already on the channel, but I will link them down in the description as well as the end cards if you want to watch them after this video. So this featherweight fight between Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker is very important, particularly for Dan Hooker. He's moving down from lightweight. He had mixed success up there. Now he's moving back to featherweight and looking for a potential career resurgence. And this is no easy fight for him. I mean, Arnold Allen is a legit featherweight, ranked number 7 in the world right now. No easy test for Dan Hooker moving back down into the weight class. And if Dan Hooker loses this fight, which is a real possibility, he's going to be in a terrible spot career-wise. So it's just very important for Dan Hooker. And for Arnold Allen, this would probably be the biggest win of his career. I know Dan Hooker isn't on no huge win streak. He's coming from outside the division. But Dan Hooker is probably the biggest name that Arnold Allen has ever fought. And we'll go over his resume here in a second. But if you look at the tail of the tape, Arnold Allen is ranked number 7 in the UFC official rankings within the featherweight division. Dan Hooker number 8 within the lightweight division. I don't know why they haven't taken him out there yet. Allen is 28 years old. Hooker is 32. Allen is 5'8". Hooker is 6 foot. Allen has a 70-inch reach, and Hooker has a 75.5-inch reach. So if you look at Arnold Allen's resume, in his entire pro MMA career, he only has one loss, and that was all the way back in 2014. Since he's been in the UFC, he's won every single fight. He's currently on an 8-fight winning streak within the UFC, but not against the best competition. You look at some of the names on his resume. He has a split decision win over Makan Amirkhani back in 2017. He has a submission win over Mads Brunel, which is actually looking pretty good at this point in time. Mads Brunel having some success over at Bellator. Just recently had a hard-fought fight at Bellator 276. He has a win over Gilbert Melendez, which, you know, people probably just glance at his resume and you say, oh, well, win over Gilbert Melendez. Gilbert Melendez is the former lightweight Strikeforce champion. Gilbert Melendez had fallen off a cliff at that point in time. So, you know, that win really doesn't mean much. You know, back in January of 2020, he has a win over Nick Lentz. Kind of competitive fight. I think 2 judges might have scored a 29-28. He busted up Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz was just pressuring forward, eating shots from Arnold Allen, and just wasn't able to grapple him. And then his most recent win is the best win on his resume. He defeated Sadiq Yusuff back in April of 2021. And in this fight, he dropped Sadiq Yusuff. So, and a lot of people going into that fight were picking Sadiq Yusuff. And we just saw Sadiq Yusuff recently on the last UFC card. Looked very impressive. So that win, you know, is kind of aged pretty decently. But if you look over, you know, Arnold Allen's entire UFC resume, you can see that he's not really active. He's been in the UFC since 2015 and only has 8 fights. That's basically like 1 fight a year, a little over 1 fight a year. So not super active, not a lot of finishes. I forgot which one of these fights. He knocked a guy out at the tail end of the 3rd round and ended up going to a decision. But other than that, just 2 submission wins, and then the rest of them were decision wins. Now, if you look at Dan Hooker's career, and I actually think these guys' career are kind of comparable in a way, and I'll explain that in a bit in a second. But Dan Hooker has only won 1 fight in his last 4. He has 3 losses in his last 4 fights. Not a real good spot to be in. At one point in time, he was on a 3-fight win streak. He KO'd James Vick. Then he defeated Ali Quinta by decision. Then he defeated Paul Felder by split decision. That fight could have went either way if I'm remembering it correctly. And then he fought Dustin Poirier back in June of 2020. And if you have not seen Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier, I advise you to go watch that fight. That was an incredible fight, back and forth, one of the best fights of 2020. And on top of that, I think this loss for Dan Hooker is probably the best fight on his resume, honestly. I think a lot of people elevate Dan Hooker off this loss because we know how good Dustin Poirier is, former interim champion, you know, fought for the title multiple times, and it was very competitive, and Dan Hooker actually almost stopped Dustin Poirier multiple times throughout this fight. Super competitive, crazy fight. Go and watch that fight. Then he fought Michael Chandler at UFC 257, and he got brutally KO'd early in the fight. Michael Chandler, super explosive, nasty power early in the fight. And then Michael Chandler goes on to get a title shot just with one win in the UFC over Dan Hooker. He fights Charles Oliveira for the vacant belt and loses. Then he fights Nasrat Haqparast back at UFC 266 in September. And this was a fight, it was a little bit of a step down in competition for Dan Hooker. And he went out there and did what he was supposed to do. He outstruck Nasrat Haqparast, out-grappled him, and just won the fight. He was supposed to win that fight. He should not be losing to Nasrat Haqparast, even though I'm not saying Nasrat is like a trash can or anything, but Dan Hooker was supposed to win that fight. And then he stepped in on short notice a month later to fight Islam Makhachev. This was a fight that was talked about for quite a while, matching those two up, and he got destroyed by Islam Makhachev, taken down immediately in the first round, had nothing to offer, and was just Kimura'd. And, Dan Hooker, you can't really count this loss for too much because he stepped in on short notice. He was in the States. I don't think he had a real training camp even for Nasrat Haqparast. He definitely didn't have a full training camp for Islam Makhachev. Just terrible situation, terrible circumstances surrounding the fight. So I don't really hold that against him too much. But Dan Hooker used to fight at featherweight a while ago. He had mixed success there, and then he moved up to lightweight. But he does have a notable win, a KO win over Gilbert Burns, which has aged quite nicely. But that was all the way back in 2018, 4 years ago. How much do you really kind of put, value that when considering how long ago it was? He has a loss against Jason Knight, way back when, a loss to Yair Rodriguez. But those were so long ago, I don't know how much you can really take those into account. But I think Dan Hooker has kind of been a guy who is on the fringe of the elite, and I think Arnold Allen may be in that same spot. And like Dan Hooker, you look over his resume, not a lot of great wins over great competition. I'm not saying this is the worst resume by any means, but some of these wins just, every time it seems like he's gotten that big step up in competition, he always ends up losing. Edson Barboza, back in, I think this was in 2018, he got absolutely wrecked by Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza lit him up in that fight. We know how good Edson Barboza is, even though he's on a little bit of a decline now. Got dominated by Bryce Mitchell. Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Islam Makhachev, I already went over. Every time it seems like he gets that, little bit of a step up. Not that he's fighting bad competition. It just seems that he ends up losing. And now he comes into this fight against Arnold Allen, who I believe, even though he doesn't have the losses that Dan Hooker has, I think a similar resume. Not the greatest wins on his resume. His best win is probably that Sadiq Yusuff win where he won by decision. That's his most recent fight. And in a way, I feel like both these guys are a hair overrated. I think people act like Arnold Allen's the elite of the elite. I still don't feel like he's completely proven. And Dan Hooker, we know his skill set, and I just think he's on the fringe of being considered one of those guys. And now I'm a little bit worried moving back to featherweight after all these years of being at lightweight, putting on body mass, and now he's going to try to suck himself back down another 10 pounds to 145. I'm a little bit worried about it. It's an X factor. I would love to see him at the weigh-ins before I made this prediction video, but then, the prediction video would basically be useless because it would only be 24 hours before the actual fight. So I'm a little bit worried about that, weight cut. Arnold Allen in all his fights, it seems like, he gets hit quite a bit, even against, Nick Lentz. He ate quite a few strikes. I can't remember the Sadiq Yusuff fully, and I could not find it to rewatch it anywhere. I remember he dropped him in that fight. The Gilbert Melendez fight was an okay win. I mean, he was fairly dominant in that fight. But again, it's Gilbert Melendez. Dan Hooker also eats quite a few shots. And I think Dan Hooker is a little bit worse than Arnold Allen as far as eating shots. Dan Hooker's just getting blasted in every fight, it seems like. Every fight from recent memory. But as far as breaking down this fight, I think these guys have, a similar set of skills. I think both guys are very well-rounded. I don't think they're particularly great anywhere. I don't think, Dan Hooker is some world-class elite striker like Israel Adesanya or Alex Pereira at middleweight or anything like that. I don't think, he's a Khabib-level grappler. Same thing for Arnold Allen. They're just really good everywhere. They're really great mixed martial artists. And I have a hard time picking this fight because it's just the X factor of Dan Hooker moving down. I think these guys are on the same level as far as their striking. I think their striking is kind of similar. I think their grappling level is kind of similar. I think their jiu-jitsu level is kind of similar. So this fight's really kind of like a 50-50 fight for me. But I am going to go Arnold Allen by decision. I just don't trust Dan Hooker making that move back down to 145. I think he's going to suck himself down. I think his chin is going to be compromised. And on top of that, Arnold Allen is just a younger fighter. He's getting better with every fight. And that's one thing I look forward to, try to, pick out a guy who I think can potentially fight for a title one day. And I think this is a solid name to add to his resume. I think he's going to come in this fight. He's going to be prepared. He knows this is the biggest name he's ever faced. And I think he's going to come in ready. And I think he's going to outstrike Dan Hooker. I don't think he's going to take any huge chances. I think he's going to back up. I think Dan Hooker is going to be the guy pressuring. I think he's going to back up, just land enough strikes to eventually win, maybe a 29-28 decision. Maybe Dan Hooker gets the first round. Arnold Allen gets 2 and 3. Both guys have really good cardio. I could see Dan Hooker maybe landing like a nasty that step-in knee up the middle like he has so many times in the past, and maybe hurting Arnold Allen, but I don't really see Arnold Allen getting finished. I don't really see Arnold Allen getting the finish. He doesn't have crazy power. I would give the power advantage to Dan Hooker. We've seen Dan Hooker go a hard 5 rounds against Dustin Poirier. I don't think there's going to be any issues with his stamina for this fight. Same for Arnold Allen. But this is just a really close fight of two guys who are just really well-rounded, just great everywhere. I think it's going to be contested on the feet. I think if either guy tries to mix in the grappling, I think they're really going to cancel each other out. I think they're just that good. And I think, if Dan Hooker decides he wants to take the fight to the ground, I think Arnold Allen can stuff it. And if Arnold Allen decides to take the fight to the ground, I think Dan Hooker would be able to stuff the takedowns. If one guy really wants to get it to the ground, they're going to have to hurt the other and then jump on top of him looking for the finish. I think this is a really close fight, honestly. I think it's a close fight. But you look at Dan Hooker moving back down. I don't trust it. I think, maybe I'm dead wrong. Maybe Dan Hooker's the better striker here. And maybe he lights Arnold Allen up on the feet and wins. But I just really don't think that's likely. Dan Hooker has taken so much damage over the past few years. I think that, him moving down, again, I mentioned it a million times already, him moving down, it's just not a great look. I just, and I know we say this every single time a guy's like moving down. We're like, oh, this guy is really, putting a toll on his body moving down. Sometimes it ends up being the case. Look, we talked about it with Cody Garbrandt against Kai Kara-France, and look what happened to him there. And I know Cody had the chin issues before. Dan Hooker has a solid chin. But maybe him moving down, just to think of it, I don't think either guy's going to get finished in this fight. But, just talking about it, maybe Dan Hooker's chin, takes a massive hit with the weight cut. Maybe Arnold Allen puts him to sleep. Arnold Allen has some really technical striking. He has a good variety of attack. And I know I said this multiple times already, but he's just really solid everywhere. He's good in the clinch. He's good with the takedowns. He's good defending takedowns. He has good jiu-jitsu. He has good submission ability. But I think Dan Hooker matches him on all that. I just think Arnold Allen's the younger fighter. He doesn't have the weight cut working against him, and I think he's super technical. I think he's going to fight very smart. He has a high fight IQ. I think Dan Hooker's going to come out there and try to take his head off, and I think that it's just not going to work for him. It's going to be Dan Hooker pressuring him. It's going to be Arnold Allen moving backwards, jabbing his face off, kicking his legs, and eventually winning a decision. Maybe 30-27. I'm going to say 29-28 Arnold Allen. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.